Maybe not the most sexiest of brewing topics, but there definitely is a lot of misconception about the art of the boil. But first, it looks like something's going on in our studio. Is this possibly one of those upgrades Phil keeps talking? Oh, yeah, you got a new light. Also, we're filming upstairs in the big boy studio now. Apparently, he feels like showing off his degree in photographic technologies. Now, quickly, before he talks about film being better than digital, back to the plot. Alright, with all the distractions out of the way, let's focus on the point. And that's that most people try too hard to reach a boil, which to most people is either 100 degrees C or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But this water can never get that hot, not in liquid form at least. In fact, without altering the atmospheric pressure, the contents of this vessel could never exceed the temperatures of 210.5 degrees Fahrenheit or 99.16 repeating degrees Celsius. And because math is real, you could use that knowledge to know what elevation we filmed this very episode at. Write that down in your copybook now. So what does this mean for you, the brewer? Well, that reaching a boil is kind of bullshit. And that's something that's kind of kept a lot of people out of brewing in the first place, thinking that their stove isn't good enough to brew beer. Glossing over the fact that there is such a thing as a no-boil or raw beer, you don't really need to hit a full boil regardless. And anyone who hits a full boil is wasting fuel, energy, and money if they're going beyond a boil. If they're trying to get it hotter than a boil, it's just a waste. It's only going to create more water vapor. So unless you're trying to boil off, you're just wasting fuel and energy. Congratulations. A big misconception into why we boil beer is that we need to sanitize it, and that's actually just not true these days. Extract's already been pre-boiled. The malt and barley that we use in the brewing process has been through a process. It's not covered in dirt from the field. Plus, the mashing process is basically a pasteurization process. So unless you're pulling dirty water from a horse stall or something, the need to boil isn't there like it used to be. There are other benefits though, and that's why still most people do it, and your recipe probably says to boil, is that it also stabilizes the proteins and denatures the enzymes that you've just activated during the mash. But there are flavor components to not doing that, and people have been brewing raw beers for centuries. But so long as you're hitting 185 degrees Fahrenheit, or 85 degrees Celsius, you'll be fine with your hop utilization so long as you use twice as much as them. In fact, there's a direct correlation to the amount of alpha acids that are extracted from hops and the temperature relation to boil. The shorthand: the hotter the water, the more bitterness you will extract, whereas the lower the temperature, the more flavor you can get out. In fact, there are examples of this that are used commonly, such as hopback, flame out, whirlpool, and hop stand. These are all referring to adding hops on brew day at a lower temperature than boil. However, people would probably argue that flame out is still basically a boil. But not getting caught in the details, that this has a very different effect compared to dry hopping, which has no heat applied to it. Meaning that dry hopping only really ever adds aroma. It can add a minor amount of flavor and bitterness, but you will need time and heat to create aroma and bitterness in any tangible, real, valuable amounts. What does this mean for the practical brewer? Well, that if you're trying to avoid that bitterness from your hops, try not boiling as hard. Of course, limiting down to a 30 to 25 minute boil first is your better bet, but lowering that temperature can be that little golden secret of yours. So the real lesson of the day is that every little thing you do while brewing matters and will have some kind of effect or effect on the final product. For example, does anyone notice that those temperatures are nearly 20 degrees off and have been the whole time? It's weird. We should probably pay attention to that for later. But assuming inverse square law, I'll bet you it's even hotter down at the bottom of the pot. In fact, I'll bet it's boiling, given the fact that it's boiling. However, one would not call this a pot of boiling water, would they? Given that the water at the top is only at 173 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's not boiling at all. It's close, but I suppose that's why they would call it a partial boil, not a full boil or a rolling boil. Those come later. Right now would be a bit of a false start if a first-time brewer were to tie his hops into a hop sack and hold it at the top edge of the water. As you can see, that is not even near the bottom edge of acceptable isomerization temperatures. End of the world? Not really, but, brewing beer is like playing pool. It only counts if you did it right. And it gets hard to do repeatability if you're just lucking into great tasting beer. It's fine, it happens to me. In fact, this one time I remember when the last 15 minutes while making a cherry wheat, we lost fuel. We lost a boil. And almost immediately we freaked out. I mean, 10-gallon batch almost completely ruined, right? But if we knew a little more about water at the time, we would have known everything would be fine. We could coast in that last 15 minutes probably just good. It's not ideal, but it's easy to freak out that just because the bubbles are gone that you've lost the boil. But the hops don't actually care about the phase change of liquid to gas. It's all about the temperature and time. But here's the thing, it's a double-edged sword. You have to hit a boil, but a boil isn't everything. It's going to be all about how you interpret how your beer should be. For example, I would never not boil. I want to hit that hot break. In fact, you know what? You have been good, and you sat through me talking about water for over 5 minutes. That's some pedantic stuff. This works great for any fruit weed or anything you want the hops' delicate flavors to come forward more than anything else. Step 1, follow your recipe how it's supposed to go. Extract, all grain, brew in a bag, whatever you do. Today, we're just here to talk about the art of a boil. So, take it all the way to a full rolling boil. All the way. You'll know you've done it right when you've gotten what's called a boil over or a hot break, as it's called in the industry. We use this indicator as a time to turn down our temperature so that we can ease back into it. So we use just enough fuel so that we maintain a boil without going more than we have to. We maintain this until we work all the way through the hot break itself. At which point we go back to a normal hop schedule, but maintain about a 205 to 208 boiling temperature, with quotations around that. The benefit to doing the hot break is that because you've been holding a boil for over about 10-15 minutes, your temperature is pretty well equalized between the top and bottom. So how you add the hops don't matter as much. And in fact, there's so many variables that are nearly impossible to call that the fact that water boils at the same temperature where you're at every time is one of the few constants you have to rely on. For example, that probe at the bottom is never going to read 211. It's just never going to make it, because if it did, it would turn into vapor and leave the liquid through these bubbles, which are actually stealing heat from the liquid. And honestly, I'm pretty sure at this point that Phil only had us make a video about boiling water so that he could shoot this scene. Damn it. Well, at least it was fun to get into the pedanticness of how such minor differences and things can affect a final product of a beer. But hey, if you were willing to stick through this whole video, maybe you'd like to check out some of these other videos. Let us know down in the comments how you think we're doing, and of course, always don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.